Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to DreamWorks Switch to Life. And in today's video, we're going to be reviewing the only Wallace and Gromit thing that has ever been created with DreamWorks Animation's help. That of course being The Curse of the WereRabbit. And the reason that we're doing this is not only to lead up to the release of Wallace and Gromit's Vengeance Most Foul, but also because today marks the 19th year anniversary since the film was originally released. Thanks to this movie's existence, Wallace and Gromit is technically a DreamWorks franchise, even though the IP is actually owned by Aardman Animations. But the two of them collaborated together to make this movie, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, it's probably, as of right now, my personal favorite of the entire Wallace and Gromit franchise. And a very big reason for that is its animation. The animation quality has definitely gone up since Wallace and Gromit first started in A Grand Day Out. Now the animation actually looks fluid despite the fact that this is stop motion, not to mention the fact that there's a lot of random texturing spread throughout the film so that you can see what exactly different materials are made out of. Really, my one complaint that I do have about the texturing is that they don't really have any texturing for the rabbits. They're mostly made out of clay, but with the WereRabbit, they actually gave him fuzzy felt. And that's a little weird that they don't do it with the normal rabbits, but okay. And then there's the voice acting, which is honestly really great. Granted, this time around there's a lot more than just Peter Sallis, but speaking of, Peter Sallis does an absolutely amazing job voicing Wallace. And this time, he doesn't actually sound one-dimensional. This time, Wallace actually has emotion going into his lines, which is really cool. Add that to the fact that he actually voiced two characters in this movie, and that's really cool. But you also get a couple of other characters like Lady Tottington, who had an amazing voice actress, and Victor Quartermain definitely sounds like a hunter through and through. And I really enjoyed the music. It was definitely great and easily rememberable. But then it also doesn't actually hinder the story. In fact, it just adds to it. But with that in mind, let's talk about the story. And before we get started, I must give a very heavy spoiler warning. This movie is great if you go in blind. And if you go in with spoilers, then, well, you kind of spoiled it, but it's still good anyway, because then you can catch the subtle Easter eggs. Now, I gotta admit that I really enjoyed the story, and a big part of that is that it's the curse of the WereRabbit. And why not a werewolf? Well, because that would be a lot more dramatic, but also way more cliche. With a WereRabbit, you can actually do so much more to the story that makes it unique from other were creatures. But anyway, as the film starts, we see a bunch of pictures that tell a really funny story. I really enjoyed that. But we also learn that Wallace and Gromit are in a brand new business, rabbit hunting and catching. And the big reason for that is because of the vegetable competition, where the town hosts every single year, and they basically compete to see who has the biggest vegetables. Of course, rabbits are a constant threat to vegetables, so Wallace and Gromit spend their day in their new business, Anti-Pesto, trying to catch as many rabbits as possible. Problem is that rabbits are very, very numerous, and unfortunately they're running out of storage.
They must be breeding like, well, rabbits.
At the same time, though, Wallace, being a cheese fanatic, has gotten a little on the fat side.
I'm in the mood for food. Oh, Gromit, old pal, I'll need assistance. Ow! Oh.
So Gromit is having him stick to a diet, and unfortunately, Wallace isn't really a big fan of that, so he invents a solution where instead of being forced to eat vegetables, he'll rewire his brain to make it so he likes vegetables instead of cheese. Luckily, there's a call from Lady Tottington, who actually has them come over so that they can help her with a rabbit problem. So Wallace delays his rewiring, and they bring over their rabbit catching equipment to Lady Tottington's manor, and in the process, we also meet the villain, Victor Quartermine. And Victor is a hunter through and through. And as far as he's concerned, the only way to deal with an animal is to kill it. So he decides to help Lady Tottington by killing a bunch of the rabbits, which Lady Tottington is not a fan of. Luckily, Wallace and Gromit show up in the nick of time, and seeing how many rabbits they are, they decide to, instead of using the neck catcher, they turn on the Bunvac 6000, which is capable of 125 rabbits per minute. And I'm just gonna say, I love how this tunnel sequence looks a lot like a rabbit going to heaven after being shot by Victor. So, I really enjoy what they do with Victor's character here. So, Victor is trying to get together with Lady Tottington, but unfortunately, unlike other people, he doesn't really care about the girl for her personality or even her looks, which is a little weird. The only reason that he's interested in Totty is because of her wealth. So, honestly, he really deserves when he gets sucked into a rabbit tunnel by the Bunvac and he ends up being suffocated almost to death. And then Toddy discovers that Wallace and Gromit actually are here, and they're responsible for the disappearing rabbits, and they've managed to capture every single one humanely.
How do you intend to finish these vermin off? Crush them? Liquidize them?
They're humane.
Humane?
Which is very important because Totty is a very big fan of all things fluffy, and she doesn't believe in the killing of innocent creatures, which is something that Victor is definitely against. And so Victor leaves, and Wallace and Gromit say goodbye to Lady Tottington, who ends up giving Wallace the idea that
But they do so love their veg. It's in their little bunny natures, and you can't change that, can you?
Or can you?
And so Wallace comes up with the ingenious idea to connect the Bunvac 3000 to the mind manipulation-o-matic, and thus he can brainwash the bunnies into rabbit rehabilitation where they don't like vegetables. And I gotta say that while that does sound like a good idea on paper, what will the rabbits eat instead of vegetables? Cause, correct me if I'm wrong, but rabbits can't exactly eat meat. It's not a matter of whether or not they want to eat vegetables, it's just that their bodies can only handle produce. Anyway, the story continues with Wallace using the mind manipulation-o-matic to make the rabbits not like vegetables, but there's a malfunction where he accidentally kicks the suck function into a blow function, and instead of the mind waves going into the bunnies go into his mind waves. Or rather, a single bunny goes into the mind manipulation-o-matic, and thus Wallace and the bunny end up switching brain waves, and thus Gromit destroys the mind manipulation-o-matic, and when they test out giving the bunny a carrot, it turns out the bunny doesn't like carrots. So, rabbit rehabilitation successful.
We'll call him Hutch, shall we?
That is until the moon rises, and it turns out that a brand new monster called the WereRabbit goes around town destroying the anti-pesto property, making it so that all the vegetables are put at risk, and the only person who actually sees the WereRabbit up close is the church priest P.C. McIntosh. And the priest ends up showing that the WereRabbit is an actual legitimate threat, and thus Wallace and Gromit are tasked with capturing the WereRabbit. So Wallace makes a Lady WereRabbit suit that Gromit will control because, as we all know, there's no bigger trap than love. Unfortunately, due to Wallace's reckless driving, the Lady WereRabbit suit is actually kind of destroyed.
Stick around, lad.
So Gromit takes over the car while Wallace goes to disappear to take care of the WereRabbit pieces, and that's when the WereRabbit attacks. Gromit keeps trying to get Wallace's attention, but Wallace just doesn't show up. So Gromit goes in a chase with the WereRabbit one-on-one. Unfortunately, despite his best efforts, the WereRabbit actually escapes Gromit. So Gromit spends the rest of the night trying to get out of the WereRabbit's den, and when he does, it turns out that the hole he escapes out of is right in Wallace and Gromit's front yard. So Gromit tries to follow the tracks of the WereRabbit, and I really love how Wallace is trying to pin the blame on Gromit for disappearing last night, but in reality it was Wallace who disappeared. But luckily, Gromit manages to follow the footprints of the WereRabbit all the way to the basement, where they discover that Hutch, the rabbit that swapped brainwaves with Wallace, is a little bit bigger. So it turns out that Wallace realizes that the lunar panels on the mind manipulation-o-matic makes it so that Hutch undergoes a hideous transformation every time the moon comes up, turning him into the WereRabbit.
Okay, so we've created a veg-ravaging rabbit monster, but we've also captured it.
So Wallace goes over to Lady Tottington to deliver the good news, while Gromit builds a containment unit for Hutch. But when he finishes and closes the basement door, he realizes that the trail of footprints doesn't actually lead to the basement, it continues beyond the basement. And when Gromit follows it to Wallace's bedroom, he discovers carnage. It turns out that Hutch was actually a red herring. Turns out that Wallace is actually the WereRabbit. So Gromit goes over to Lady Tottington's house to stop Wallace from turning into a WereRabbit at her place, and thus Gromit actually ruins a very uncomfortable scene if you happen to be an adult, because there's a lot of adult jokes in that one scene, not to mention a ton of adult jokes spread throughout the entire movie.
He's never shown any interest in my produce.
Oh, his loss, Lady Tottington.
But on the way home, Wallace and Gromit stumble across a tree which has been chopped down, and that's because Victor Quartermind is actually trying to get rid of Wallace because Wallace is competition with him getting Totty. And that's when the moon rises, and very slowly and dramatically, Wallace turns into the WereRabbit. And Victor realizes that he doesn't need to intimidate Wallace, he can just straight up kill him. So with that in mind, Victor heads over to the Reverend P.C. McIntosh, and thus he learns the secrets of the WereRabbit and discovers that the only way to kill it is with a bullet made of pure gold. And I really don't see what the point of that is, because wouldn't it, like, any bullet do the trick? I mean, I get that silver kills werewolves, but the origin of the WereRabbit is a completely different story because it's just Wallace swapping brainwaves with a bunny. And because of that, well, I really don't understand how he manages to transform into a WereRabbit. I get maybe if Wallace had some rabbit tendencies like eating flowers and vegetables, but also has a humping leg and loves to bounce, but he actually straight up turns into a WereRabbit. Maybe there really is something to the moon turning people into were creatures. Oh well. So Lady Tottington realizes that the WereRabbit isn't actually captured like Wallace said, and thus Wallace kind of broke her heart a little. And so Gromit realizes that he needs to break the news to Wallace that he's the WereRabbit.
What? What? You think that I'm because of these? The next thing you'll be saying is that, oh, Hutch is turning into me.
Oh, I do like a bit of gorgonzola.
Luckily, Wallace tries to rebuild the mind manipulation-o-matic, but his mind is just a rabbity mush. But thankfully, his inventiveness manages to transfer over to Hutch, so Hutch rebuilds the mind manipulation-o-matic until Lady Tottington shows up at the door, and thus Totty breaks Wallace's heart by breaking up with him, and also announcing that she's given Victor permission to kill the WereRabbit. And because of that, Wallace actually tries to hide, especially when the moon comes out. And so Victor storms into Wallace and Gromit's house, ready to kill the WereRabbit, until the WereRabbit manages to escape thanks to Gromit dressing up in the Lady WereRabbit costume and taking the bullet for Wallace. So Victor locks Gromit up in the kennel and makes it so that he can't escape to help his master. And so Gromit, with the help of Hutch manages to escape, and then this leads to a final confrontation at the vegetable competition where Victor tries to kill Wallace the WereRabbit, only for Wallace to fight back and even kidnap Lady Tottington, at which point he does his signature handshake thing where Totty realizes that this actually is Wallace and thus can't be killed. Unfortunately, Victor reveals that he knew that Wallace was actually the WereRabbit, so Totty realizes that Victor is just a savage monster who wants to kill things.
And if I can't have your money, I can still bag your bunny!
And so Wallace is running away from Victor Quartermine, while Gromit is trying to help protect Wallace, but in the process has to fight one-on-one with his dog, Philip, and I really enjoy Philip's character. He's basically all fierce and ferocious, and pretty much everything that Gromit isn't. Also, their fight leads to the single funniest scene in the entire movie. Anyway, Gromit manages to defeat Philip, goes to rescue Wallace, and then Gromit almost falls to his death, but Wallace jumps after him and uses his own body to catch Gromit, and thus Wallace ends up dying. And in death, Wallace's mind manipulation waves that were swapped with the bunny ends up returning back to normal, and he's cured. He's no longer a WereRabbit. For some strange reason, that's how dying works. And luckily, it turns out that Gromit uses a piece of cheese to bring Wallace back from the dead. But of course, the townspeople are still angry that the WereRabbit might still be alive, so Gromit dresses up Victor Quartermine in the Lady WereRabbit suit and unleashes him to the public. And when the vegetable competition is finally over, all of the bunnies and rabbits gather together at Lady Tottington's place, which becomes a safe haven for all things fluffy, including Hutch. So now there will always be a part of Wallace at Lady Tottington's manor, which if you ask me might be a bit of a problem because Wallace and Lady Tottington have very clear feelings for each other and they definitely want to be in a relationship. Hutch might just be a third wheel, or living with Lady Tottington, he might completely take over the relationship. And that right there is the end of the movie. Overall, there's a bit of some logic breaking here and there, but when you're dealing with lycanthropy, you really expect that to happen. But for the most part, Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the WereRabbit, is just a really fun movie with incredible stop-motion animation and, above all else, amazing humor. I really enjoyed the humor for this movie. But what did you guys think? Make sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comments. What do you think about DreamWorks' only Wallace and Gromit production? If you enjoyed, consider becoming a member of this channel by clicking the join button down below, or just do the free option and subscribe. And if you do, be on the lookout for my next Wallace and Gromit review, and eventually the review of Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. But until then, I hope that you guys are staying safe out there, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.
I want to pay, please.
Oh, grand. We take check or cash?
To pay, you idiot. My hair is in your machine.
Oh, no, it's only rabbits in there. The hare, I think you'll find, is a much larger mammal.
Out of my way, fool.